Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another Canadian immigration live Q&A. I'm here, which in what seems like an eternity since I was last doing this. Igor and Alicia covered the live stream last week, and I am very grateful for that. But it's awesome to be back. How are you, Alicia?
Doing okay, Mark. I'm doing okay. How are things for you?
Fantastic. And we're super excited because we spent probably about 30 minutes making sure that our audio and our video was working properly. And we finally resolved the issue. So, pretty happy about that. It was looking a little questionable there for a while, but we are all connected in and things are great. Okay, let's see here. I actually am going to do some shout outs just to start. So, we've got. Anand says, hey, Mark and Alicia, great to have you joining in with us today. I'm just wondering here, I'm going to adjust my mic a little bit here. I think everybody can hear me good. Okay. And those of you who are new to the live Q&A, if this is the first time that you've been watching it, we'll just go over a few little quick reminders. So this is your opportunity to get your questions answered. And Alicia, I am not aware of too many other representatives out there, lawyers or consultants, that do what we do. We've been at this for, oh my goodness, at least, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years in this kind of a format. And even before then, I did live Q&As. I used to call them my express entry lives. EE Live Q&A, and did that for years and years as people were figuring out how express entry worked and had lots of questions. I think now the majority of people, there's lots of content out there on express entry, but the reality is, Alicia, I have never lived through more confusing, just tumultuous times than we are living right now with Canadian immigration. Would you agree?
It is more complex than I think it's ever been in the past, and it's more competitive right now. So we have a situation where a lot of people are going to have to leave in the short term because we have new levels plan caps, and that's going to be capping permanent residents as well as the temporary residents. And so we have a number of people whose permits are starting to come to an end, and that's why Mark and I developed a whole Time's Up series. And so we are both immigration lawyers. If you go to our website, Holthe Immigration Law, you will be able to see that Time's Up series. We have a blog, so we have written articles, but we also have a podcast. And so we've been working on that Time's Up series in our blog and then also in the podcast. So if you go to our law firm website, go to the blog, you can take a look, and if you go down, you'll see that some of them are tagged the Time's Up series. For example, the one on H&C is when not to claim refugee status, what's happening with the end of work permits, what are your options for work permits if they're going to expire right away. So all these are part of that Time's Up series. And then the new recording that we're going to do right away here is going to be, I've been talking about bridging open work permits versus bridging closed work permits, and I always get
Yes.
questions about, can I change employers? I'm partway through my PNP application, and this is the episode that you're going to want to listen to.
Absolutely. We were going to record it before, but we had some technical difficulties. So right after our live ends today, we're going to be recording that next episode of the Canadian Immigration Podcast. And those of you who have not yet subscribed, those of you who are commuting long distances and you've got a long ways to get to work, this is a great opportunity for you to hear what we're talking about. Now, obviously, if you've got good data, you can just watch. We try to do, especially the Time's Up series, we try to record the video and upload it to YouTube as well. But if you want to listen, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Canadian Immigration Podcast, like Alicia indicated, is just full of these Time's Up series, which is all focused on you guys that are just struggling to know what you need to do. And if there's one good place to start, I would encourage you to go back to episode 149, which was kind of our flagship episode to kick off this Time's Up series. What to do when your work permit is expiring, essentially, is and that's what most of you are facing. So, so I strongly encourage you to go there and listen to the podcast. And then as you listen to that, each of the subsequent podcasts all build on each of the things that we discussed in that first episode. So, so make sure that you check that out. And if you have not yet, do so, subscribe to it and share it. There's nothing that we appreciate more when people share. All right, let's give a couple shout outs. We've got Dijin, who's in Calgary, same as Alicia there. We got Andy over in Ottawa. Good to see you, Andy. He says it is snowing today in Ottawa. Any snow up in Calgary, Alicia?
Not yet, but apparently it's all going to shift tomorrow. The polar vortex is going to come down and it's just going to schmuck BC and Alberta. So we're waiting for it.
Well, I don't know if you guys, how many of you guys have pets at your residence, but I have a little dog named Simba, and he is going to scratch the paint off my door unless I let him in. So give me a second. Come on, Fluffball, let's go. Okay, say hello. There he goes. All right, he likes to hang out in the window over here, and I guess I better open the blind up for him.
The things we do for our pets.
Oh, the things, that is so true. But he's a good dog, so most of the time, right? Pretty good. Yeah, pretty good. All right, let's get back to it here. Okay, so yes, we've got Henry, who is tuning in from Bolivia. Great to have you, Henry. And hello, Sarab. Good to see you. Let's see what else we have here. And yeah, feel free to post your questions. Just to kind of clarify where we started, this live Q&A is designed to answer your questions on Canadian immigration. Now, one of the things that we are prevented from doing is providing legal advice. So if you say, Mark, should I do this? Or what should I do? Those kinds of questions really are ones that we would direct you to book a consultation with us, because there's no way we can get enough information from you in a YouTube comment to be able to properly assess your situation and give you legal advice. That kind of stuff just takes time. And so we will pull up the questions that we feel are the most applicable to everyone today. So questions that relate to many people who might be watching or who watch this as a recording. We provide as much insight as we can on the direction that we think the government is going. We clarify the different immigration policies and the laws and the different programs. And so that is what we focus on here. But if you have a specific question that really only relates to you, sometimes we'll try to make it into more of a general kind of response that benefits everyone. But if you're wondering, Mark, why are you not answering the question? Well, there might be a couple reasons. One is it might be something specific like that. Two, we may just not have the answer. I may not know. You might be asking something about a caregiver program, for instance, which, we understand the basics, and there is a new caregiver program that is coming. They indicated here in the spring, and we'll see ultimately when the final details are released. But we don't do a lot of that kind of work. And so, for example, or the maybe the Yukon provincial nominee program. Alicia and I, we don't do any, provincial nominees for the Yukon or Northwest Territories. And so we may not have the answer that you're looking for. And so that may be the reason. So one thing I would encourage you not to do is to repost your comment 15 or 20 times in hopes that I will select it, because I have the ability on my little app here to choose and identify the ones that are going to be of the most use. So I just wanted to lay that out at the beginning so that no one's feelings get hurt if we don't answer your question. Okay. Let's do a few more little shout outs here. Anish says, loving the EE course. Thanks, Mark. Awesome. I'm so happy, Anish. And actually, that's a nice segue, because we have the masterclass this evening. And so if those of you who have not yet, or you're considering what you're going to do with your future, and if you've got options through Express Entry, and we did have a round of invitations just recently, didn't we, Alicia, for CEC? Yeah, so last week, and I'm sure you guys talked about it, but you can see 4,000 CECs were invited, and it pulled the scores down to 527, which is still so high, just so high. But we have what I've created is the Express Entry Accelerator course. And so those of you, and it should be in the description for the video, you should be able to go down and just click on it, and it'll take you right here. But the Express Entry Accelerator, the reason that I love it so much is because the video content itself is excellent. It has literally a video that covers every aspect of Express Entry, from how to complete the profile to how to complete the EAPR after you get an ITA. But the course itself, the thing I enjoy personally the most is that we have a masterclass that's associated with it. So every 2 weeks, and it's usually a Wednesday evening from 4 to 5 o'clock generally. Sometimes it goes longer, it depends on how many people are there. We have our masterclass where you can come, and if there's any specific questions that you don't have, um, a clear answer to because your situation is a little unique, you can come to the masterclass. But the course itself is full of, like I said, there's over 10 hours of step-by-step video lessons. The biweekly master classes that I just talked about, it's full of sample documents and templates. And we actually have and are working through a number of custom GPTs to help you generate your documents. We had gone through the process initially of retaining a firm to help us custom build some AI, but it wasn't worth it. At the end of the day, the what's coming off through ChatGPT and Claude and some of these other Gemini AI tools is getting so good that it's better just to grab what's off the shelf and then customize it and teach it and train it so that it's of the most use to you guys. So definitely, if you have not subscribed, do it. You can join the masterclass this evening. And when you subscribe for it, even for the immigration consultants, there's CPD accreditation for you. And this is the big one here I want to point out. So you have lifetime access because it's going to get updated because Alicia, the job offer points are going to be stripped here any day now. And then Mark's going to have to go back and re-record some other videos. Now, I did it. I re-recorded the whole thing at the beginning of 2024. So everything is pretty much consistent. There are changes in the category-based draws. We know that for 2025. But we will, when you subscribe for it now, you get lifetime access and you have the ability to have access to all of the updates, and you can come back to as many master classes as you want. So there we have that. So thanks so much, Anish. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. And I hope to see you tonight in the master class. All right, let's keep zipping through here and we'll just do a couple more shout outs. And yeah, please do post where you're tuning in from. We love to see where everybody is connecting with. And I see a lot of familiar faces here. Claire says, glad to be here. Claire from Grand Prairie. Great to have you, Claire. Yes, Arlene says Simba is adorable. Yeah, Simba is a classic name for a pet, Andy. He looks like a lion, so he's not quite as ferocious as a lion. He's a little bit of a teddy bear, but he is a good door alarm when someone comes to the door because he does bark when someone comes to the door. No bite, just bark. All right, we've got Mary Lou who's up in Fort Mac as well, Fort McMurray, Northern Alberta. And Jimmy's over in Mississauga. Welcome, Jimmy. It's great to have you with us here today. And we have Dimas is, in England. First time. Welcome, Dimas. We'll give you, I almost had some applause there. Had my audio turned down. We'll give you some proper applause there. Here we go. There we go. Pushing the buttons. Okay, Jessica is over in Victoria. Good morning to you, Jessica. And let's see what else we have here. And I'll pull up Muhammad here because this is being streamed not just on YouTube, but Facebook and X and LinkedIn. And so, yes, Muhammad will definitely get to your question. He says, after a lot of changes in immigration policy, does Manitoba PNP or job offer that leads to PNP still valid? We are going to, that's something that it's under constant change. And the provinces only now are starting to learn what their allocations are, but I'll get to that in a little bit. All right, let's see who else. Let's see here. We've got lots of questions. Any other shout outs? Here's a question. The Audacity says, Mark, any update on the RCIP? Well, we know that some of the cities in Ontario have now, basically they have announced that they have been selected as some of the locations, but I don't believe at this stage that the full list has been released. So we know that, I'm just looking here. Let's see if there's any updates here. There was the one announcement. I can't remember which town, the MP, I think it was a Liberal MP. Was it Haydu who had done a press release on that? And I haven't heard anything on it since that update. So we don't. Yeah, Thunder Bay. Okay, so there you go. So I think Thunder Bay was one of the communities in Ontario that could confirm that they had been selected, and that was within the riding of one of the Liberal MPs. So, and they had a little press release, but we have not seen anything about the remaining lists. So we'll see. And this is something I know a lot of you are interested in. And for the purposes of Alberta, I sure hope that Claresholm can continue going down that path. They've set up such a wonderful system for the Rural Northern Immigration Program, which was the predecessor to this Rural Community Immigration pilot program. And I hope that they will have an opportunity to continue forward, because so much good was created by that. And these communities, Alicia, that participated, they've really had an influx of workers. And so the
Yeah.
side benefit is that, the communities where they really want people to be able to work and fill the jobs in maybe communities where there's a larger exodus of young people moving out, there's an opportunity to keep those businesses running and flourishing.
Yeah, and so we really are waiting to hear because we do have the Canada Gazette posting. So we know that December 14th, they set out the regulatory requirements under a ministerial instruction for both the Francophone community immigration class and the rural community immigration class as well. And so now we have two new classes. And the difference is that they used to be pilot programs before, and now they are going to be official new classes federally, which is great. But we are waiting to hear what the program details are and exactly which communities are going to be involved. We do know a number of things from looking at the regulatory impact statement or looking from the Canada Gazette publication, because it goes through very similar eligibility criteria in a lot of cases to express entry. And so making sure that you understand what your language requirements are, making sure that you have your work experience, making sure that that work experience is continuous, or that you have at least the equivalent of a full-time job over the last eligible period of time. So all these things are very similar to Express Entry. So understanding how Express Entry works is going to help you when you're looking at eligibility for these new classes, and they will roll out more information. So for people who are desperate and they're not being able to get an invitation to apply because the CRS scores for Express Entry are so high, these two new categories are going to be super important.
I was just going through, Alicia, just to see if I could find my update that I did on. As soon as we saw the information in the Gazette, I did a little summary on X and I posted it. There's been so much going on in the news, and that, yeah, I look at my Twitter feed, my X feed, and it is chock full of chock full of posts and shares and just everything you could imagine, especially, given the election in the South and the rhetoric that's being tossed around, and maybe not so much rhetoric and reality of tariffs if they decide to apply those, which will have a very, very chilling effect on Canada. Um, let's just see here. Yeah, because I'll just share my screen here. And those of you who are on X, I'm just at Mark Holthe, so you can follow me there. But Andrew Carvajal and Carvajal and myself, we did an update, the key updates for 2024, and in that it was for the Legal Professional Education Network. And in that program that we did, we covered in depth those two programs. But I think now that I think about it, it's been a long time. You can see all of ours, even our what we're doing here. Our lives are posted on X, but it's been a while since they had posted those regulations. But um, it is fairly similar to how the Rural Northern Immigration Program has been structured. I'm surprised they moved away from the list, but sorry, they moved away from that title. But ultimately, lots of people are going to be very curious because there's going to be people moving, looking for opportunities. And for years, Alicia, we have talked about, those who are in Ontario, you are at a distinct disadvantage because of the numbers of foreign workers that are in Ontario right now. We know that over 50% of you, when you came on the study permit, well, all of the study permit holders, over 50% were destined for Ontario. And so when you have all those individuals that are transitioning, it's just, yeah, it's a crazy world. Okay, Sarek says, "Hey, Mark and Alicia, from a masterclass student. Hope you're doing well." Sarek, good to see you. We'll give some applause there, joining the masterclass. Let's see here. Uh, let's see. Okay, we do have okay, so here's the question. Parveen posted this super chat about the rural community immigration program. So launched in Thunder Bay, why they didn't launch in other cities. Thank you. What could be the possibilities, reasons, or Ontario have election? Okay, so Parveen, it's a federal matter. So the Ontario election doesn't affect it at all. I think this MP was just a little exuberant. And so the other communities probably know who they are, but they've been instructed by the government not to, release anything until they make their official announcement. But for whatever reason, this MP, I guess, went a little rogue and decided to have her own press conference. And I can't remember, was it Patty Haydu? I can't remember who it was. Anyways, but they had done a little press release, well, they just let the world know that their community, Thunder Bay, had been selected as one of the communities. So we will see, but we're all waiting. All of my friends in social media land, with my fellow colleagues and immigration lawyers, and Alicia and I, we have not heard anything on it yet. So we will absolutely let you know the moment we do, but because we know the interest. But at this stage, it's somewhat of a mystery still what that final list is going to be. Okay, let's see if any more shout outs here. I think we've pretty much hit everybody. Angela says, so happy to be here from my bed in Calgary. Well, great. I'm glad that hopefully you're not too sick. She says, I'm new here. Good to see you, Angela, as well. And we'll just about wrap it up. Okay, Canadian CNC Masters. Hello from Mississauga. Lots of love. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Asma says good. Well, that's great. We're happy that things are good. And we do have, I'll just pull this up because we've got Facebook and we do have LinkedIn. So John Paul says, I just wanted to give you guys props for the immigration work you do. My family and I would not have obtained our PR status without the information you regularly share. Mark and Alicia are the best in the immigration space. This coming from a fellow lawyer. More power to your team. Thank you so much, John Paul. We really appreciate that. We'll give you some applause for that. So it's great, Alicia, to see that this is reaching across multiple platforms. Okay, let's just see here. I think we're just about to the end of those. Okay, all right. So a couple of things we wanted to start with, you guys, is just general updates on what's happening in the world. And it is insane how many changes are occurring. And we could have a podcast alone that just talks about the updates in immigration. You can go to the government's website to the notices, and this gives you a little bit of a heads up as to what is coming. So, and what has been announced. So if we start at the beginning of January the 3rd, it talks about the 2025 Agri-Food Pilot application cap. We haven't talked a lot about that. It's a pretty narrow stream. We've done it. I've had some clients go through successfully in the past. So I'm grateful for it because it opens up doors for otherwise people who may not have a pathway to permanent residence. But the Agri-Food Pilot is still alive and well, and then caps have been applied to that. We won't get into too much detail there. And on the 14th, there were changes announced to the open work permits, which took effect on the 21st. But these changes are probably some of the more complex, hard to understand changes. And Alicia, this is so strange what they've done with these open work permits, because they've actually taken it back and made it more strict and less facilitative than it has ever been in the history of this type of work permit. For years, when we had the worlds of 0A, B, NOx, anyone who was a skilled worker, now tier 0, 1, 2, or 3, if they got a work permit, their spouses could come and work. And with the Liberal government's desire to have up to 2 million or more people leave within the next couple of years, one of the strategies that they are looking at is, well, one of the strategies that they're employing now is to restrict the number of work permits that accompanying spouses can get. And they figure if there's fewer spouses, I guess, well, that's a number of, people are going to be more apt to leave if their spouse can't come here and work and stay with them. And it's somewhat ironic because they had opened up the work permit program, and it's gone through so many changes over the years. We could have a separate podcast, a separate live stream just on this topic alone. But when it was initially set up, skilled workers, spouses of skilled workers could all obtain them. Then they added in dependents for a little bit. So even I think 16 and 17-year-olds in Ontario, I think at one time were able to get open work permits. I can't remember. And then I think Alberta was 18 to 21. Once you hit 22, you're no longer dependent. And then Jason Kenney pulled that back about 10 years ago and said, no, we're not doing that. They're taking the jobs from our Canadian kids. At least that was the response. And then we rolled back to the previous skilled worker only. And then I think it was 2022, I think that maybe December or November, I can't remember when it was, they opened it up again to low skill, pretty much to everybody, subject to, I think, some restrictions for agriculture or LMIA low wage. I can't remember, I think it was. And once again, they added independent children. And then now, as of July, basically effective January 21st, that's all changed, and only spouses of certain international students and foreign workers are able to apply. So once again, we could go on a quite lengthy episode alone just talking about international students. But now spouses of foreign workers, essentially, you can see here, if you will be limited. So that's international students are limited to master's programs that are 16 months or longer, doctoral programs, and select professions and eligible programs, which we won't get into. For foreign workers, it's tier 0 or 1. So if you're in those tiers, then yes, your spouse can get it. Or select tier 2 or 3. And that's where, that are in natural applied sciences, construction, health, natural resources, sports, and military sectors. So it's interesting how these got on the list. What are your thoughts
Uh,
about this, Alicia?
Yeah, and Mark, last week, Igor did a really good job because they buried this. And so Igor
Yeah.
did a good job. He updated his blog post right away on our website, and we took viewers through how do you find that list. It's buried in the how to apply. You've got to click through a whole bunch of different drop downs. And he right away went to the blog and he updated and put the list of tier 2 and tier 3 eligible professions right in his blog post. So it's easy to find. You can go there and find it, but it is difficult on the website to find, IRCC, this
Okay.
website. And the other big problem is that they're specifically saying that you're not eligible if the principal applicant is applying for a postgrad work permit. They're not eligible because the principal applicant has to have a work permit that's going to be valid for 16 months before the family member is able to apply. And this is going to basically just make it almost impossible for the majority of people to bring a spouse who isn't already here, who's just extending.
Now, Alicia, with that, if you're applying at the same time, how does that apply? So if you've
I'm
got
pretty,
someone who's 2 years and they've got a 3-year postgrad work permit they're applying for, and they include their spouse with that application, the spousal
yeah,
open work permit, and they've got proof of employment, like they've got their job offer for 2 years or whatever.
like it specifically says who's not eligible. It says if you're applying for a PGWP but haven't received a positive decision on your application at the time the decision on your spousal work permit application is made, you're not eligible.
Now
So it's going to
they're
be tough
basically
slogging.
saying you're toast if you're
Yeah,
not in a 0 or 1.
yeah,
Well, even if
yeah,
you are, I guess, in a 0 or 1, unless you've
yeah,
got the
yeah. You have
16,
to
you're
have
toast.
16 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so we'll bring up the mastermind behind it. Mr. Miller, we're not happy with you. We're not. There we go. I think they went way too far with that provision. And I'll be honest, Alicia, the people who are willing to follow the rules and abide will leave. And the people who are not, well, it's going to be a crazy world. But if Minister Miller here envisions that you know the vast majority of people are going to comply. Well, all I can say is I hope that that's the case. And Alicia and I encourage people that if you are running out of time, your time is up, that you do, for all of the reasons we've discussed in our blog post and sorry, in our podcast episode on the consequences of staying basically beyond the validity of your work permit. It's not something you want to go down. But boy, they're definitely sincere in their efforts to get 2 million people out of the country, which I think
Yep.
the approach that they've taken it would never have happened if they weren't as down in the polls, and I think trying to save their jobs. And it's politics now. I don't think it's anything else. And when you look at the whole political world, I know we don't want to get into that. it doesn't matter what party it is. Everybody wants to keep their jobs. And I think that's what the Liberals are doing right now. They see that they're down in the polls, and they're hoping that these very draconian 180 degree that they've taken on immigration is somehow going to save their election chances. And I don't know what will happen, but it just really bothers me when immigration is used as a wedge issue in politics. But it's always has been, and it always will be. All right. Going back to the changes here, just give me 1 second. Okay. So going back to the changes. So, Alicia, there are some new proposed penalties for paid immigration representatives who break the law, which includes us. So
Mhm.
we know that CELA, a Canadian Immigration Lawyer Association, and I believe the Canadian Bar Association, I would hope the Consultant Association as well, is providing submissions on this. But we know that there are a lot of bad actors out there. And if the government or individuals, if the government perceives that, the associations are not doing enough to protect individuals, well, they're going to create their own consequences for people who break the rules. And I know as lawyers, we are governed by the Law Society, and it has always been our position that we are in the best place and position to have the ability to police our own members. And I think we do a darn good job of it. Just this week, I think, Alicia, we had 2 or 3 notifications of people who are either suspended or disbarred or whatever for far less than we see happening in immigration with some of these representatives. And the law societies, we believe, are fully positioned, and they strike the fear of God in people. I'll be honest. When I'm running my trust account and everything, I am so careful because I don't want to lose my livelihood, the ability to practice law, because I'm not taking the management of client trust funds seriously, or just even how we advise our clients. And so I think this once again is overkill, and it's targeting people that it's a waste of time to target. It's kind of like the International Mobility Program and the money spent to audit that, Alicia. Like, I know for sure you have to make sure that individuals are, they're complying with the terms of their employment when they come in on an intercompany transfer work permit or things like that. But the effort put into that, if they had focused that on the temporary foreign worker program, they wouldn't be taking those draconian steps that they did, which are, all announced earlier here in the fall, to reduce the availability of LMIAs because of job offer fraud. At least that's the indication.
Yeah, and I mean, you will see too, there's another notice on the proposed new rules to improve the regulation of immigration consultants. And so this is something specifically that's coming out. It's published in the Gazette as well. And so they've got these two things happening in tandem. And it's important for people to know. And I can't tell you, Mark, how many times where I've had a client and I said, well, what happened when you filed your last application? Did you talk about the issue? Did you talk about the fact that you're now married? Or did you disclose this refusal on this prior visa application? And they said, oh, no, an agent helped me do that application and I don't have access to it anymore. And I have no way of checking what I said in that old application. And right away, people hopefully need to understand that there are only certain designated representatives, so immigration lawyers or people who are actually regulated immigration consultants under Section 91 of the Act, who can charge a fee to provide immigration advice. And anybody who's an unauthorized representative is doing something super illegal. And if you are taking advice from somebody who's an unauthorized representative, immigration says, that's on you. You're responsible for who you hire. And if they're telling you something that's incorrect or leading you to misrepresent, that's illegal for you to misrepresent. You can have a 5-year bar. And then they're also putting in, a new $1.5 million potential financial penalty for anybody who's counseling misrepresentation. So they are getting serious about this.
Mhm.
So these are all new notices that have just come out in the last week and a bit.
Yeah. And I think the thing that irritates me most here is that a lot of the fraud really, really ramped up significantly post pandemic. And so in 2000, the college in 2021, there was another kick at the can, the third version for the regulation of immigration and citizenship consultants. And you can see here, the regulations, what these proposed regulations, you can go here to the Canada Gazette and read them, but elaborate on the college's authority under the act, the College Act, in such areas as, like, I don't understand why you need to elaborate. Like, this was all set up, but The public register of immigration consultants. Okay, well, anybody can go and search and determine if their consultant is regulated. The complaints and discipline processes. Okay, this one, in investigations conducted by the college, but this one right here, establish a compensation fund. This, I don't think people understand, is there available to them. So if you have been harmed by any unethical immigration consultant who's been representing you, you have access to this. This fund is put in place to protect people, well, at least allow them to have their money returned. Um, and then this one, I'll be surprised. I'm very curious as to what they really intend with this, Alicia. So clarify the minister's power to appoint someone to take over board duties if the board fails to meet its responsibilities under the College Act. Like, what the heck does that mean? Does it mean that they're reiterating, board, you're not doing a good enough job? This is the same language that they imposed on the schools all across the country when they said, if you don't, start cleaning up your act, then you'll force our hand. And so
Yeah.
I can't imagine, that they mean anything other than we're getting ready to take over, because I think there's a massive lawsuit that's could be brewing, and even like I don't well, I better not get too carried away
All
here,
of
but
this to
the
say,
government is, what I'm saying is, the government, when they waded into this, the regulation of immigration consultants, they exposed themselves to potential liability if the regulation of the immigration consultants is not accomplishing what it was designed to do. And so when I see that they are going to appoint someone to take over the board, things cannot be going super well. And I encourage all of you good immigration consultants out there to get involved in your associations, to take the lead and to continue driving the ship forward, in making your organization, just a good, reputable organization. One that takes care of its members, but also protects the public. That's why it's there. And yeah. Anyways, okay.
so
Whew.
the last notice is important, and that's the
Okay.
2025 provincial allocation on caps for study permits. So take a look at that one. That one was just released last week, on Friday. And so this is talking about a breakdown of how many allocations there are for graduate students and how many allocations there are for undergrad degrees per province. And so this is something we know that they are reducing the overall level of study permits that are being issued across Canada. And then every single province and territory then has an allocation limit as well. And so you'll see, like if you're in the Northwest Territory, it's 0 for grad students. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's only a few other ones. So take a look at the breakdown here, right? Alberta's only going to have a little bit less than 4,000 in terms of grad students, about 29,000 in terms of expecting required cohorts. And then, we have not a lot of spaces left, in terms of new study permit allocations. So this was just released last week, and it is difficult if you are coming to the end of your work permit. Some people say, oh, I'll just try to apply for a study permit. That is no longer going to be an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
There was one little ray of hope. There was one
Yeah.
good news thing that they did yesterday. I'm helping somebody right now try to file a super visa for his mom. And it's difficult sometimes to get those health insurance policies that cover repatriation. It's got to cover over $100,000. And usually you had to do that with a Canadian based insurance provider. They're opening that up. But, buyer beware, right? Make sure that you are doing
Mhm.
your research and due diligence to make sure that you are using a reputable health insurance policy if you are using a company outside of Canada.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. All right. Okay. There was a lot to cover, and I know we've got a lot of questions that have built up that individuals are anxious for us to respond to. So let's dive into to a few of those. Okay. All right. So let's just pull this one. I get a lot of from Anand. And Anand says, "Can I only contact my local MP when my PR application had crossed the processing time? What if the processing times changes, i.e. increases since the time I submitted my application?" And one of
And
these,
Mark,
Alicia, oh, go ahead. Yep.
yeah, we did answer Anand's questions last week on this
Okay.
exact thing with Igor as well. And, processing times definitely are going up. The Igor was pretty pretty concerned because if all immigration applicants started downloading all their concerns to MPs, it completely paralyzes the system every
Yeah,
time, you contact the MP and try to get them to follow up on your case because it's sitting within normal processing times. So take a look at the IRCC posted processing times. We know those processing times are going to go up. We also know that there's going to be over 3,000 um, firings, I guess, of IRCC officers over the
yeah,
coming years. And so
yeah,
processing times are probably going to go up even more.
yeah. Okay, this question is from Sarlene. Thank you for all the great content. I'm a CEC candidate with 492 score in EE with a pharmacist degree back in India. Um, I run out of my work permit currently working as a pharmacist. Oh, okay. In Indian ATM as I've run out of my. Oh, she had to go home? Is that what this is?
Maybe.
With a pharmacist degree back in India at the moment. I think that's what ATM maybe is. As I've run out of my work permit, currently working pharmacist. This is part of the reason I wanted to bring this up, you guys, is one of the things that Alicia and I talked about, and we've done in previous YouTube videos, and we've talked about is in some instances, you guys, if you do not have foreign work experience, and your work permit expires here, you've got your Canadian, you've got 2 years or more of your CEC. In some instances, if you do the calculation, you test kind of through the CRS tool that Express Entry and the IRCC has, you may find that if you work for a year outside of the country, if you haven't already, that it can actually increase your scores more. And remember, to qualify for CEC, you need 1 year in a 3-year period to be eligible for CEC. And so it's possible for someone to, if the timing was just perfect, to be outside of Canada for almost 2 years and still be eligible for CEC if the ITA happens at the right time. And so keep that in mind as you're trying to make decisions for your future, and as options are running out for you. And
And
remember that
Sarlene,
healthcare. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Alicia.
hopefully you mean that you've gone back to India or you're outside of Canada if your work permit's
Yeah.
expired. Because yeah, just like Mark was saying, it's so important that if your work permit's running out, that you make sure that you're not an overstay, that you're not working without authorization, because that can jeopardize your immigration options. But if you go back to your home country and you start gaining that foreign work experience, or any other country outside of Canada that you're authorized to work in, then that can increase your points if you're within your 3-year window.
Mm-hmm. All right, here's a question we have not gotten to this point that I can remember in the live Q&A, but it's a valid one, and unfortunately, it could very well, we could be getting this question more. Immigration enforcement is not something that our firm deals with. We refer it out to our other colleagues in the larger centers, but Anatoly says, hi, Alicia and Mark. Happy to see the live Q&A. I was wondering from a legal and procedural point of view how the deportation process works. Once one has a removal order issued against them, what happens next? What does the government need to do? Alicia, do you want to tackle that at all, or should we bypass it? So there's still a PRA and other things that take place before the formal deportation, and they give individuals the ability after they've got the removal order. Once they determine you need to leave by this stage, you do have the ability to leave voluntarily, pay your own flight, which is the best options. Um, or in case of failed refugee claimants, this is often the circumstance when a deportation starts to kick in. If they're required to cover the cost of the flight, you ultimately will be billed for it. And if you ever are in a position where you have the opportunity to come back, you have to show that you have paid that off before you're able to return.
And so this is a super technical area. There's different types of
Mhm.
removal orders. There's deportation orders, there's removal orders, there's, yeah, voluntary departure orders. There are also circumstances where, if you don't take yourself out of Canada by a specified time, then you're going to have not only might have to repay the flight, but you also have usually what is called an ARC, an authorization to return requirement. And so you can never come back to Canada unless you specifically get ministerial permission to overcome the fact that they had to remove you or that your removal order took effect. And sometimes it's an automatic thing, even if they didn't physically have to
Mhm.
remove you. So there's a whole bunch of technicalities here. And Anatoly, hopefully this isn't your
Yeah,
situation
hopefully it's
because
not
I
you, our friend.
right, because I would be
Yeah,
surprised, but reach out and have somebody book a consult if that's happening to them, and it might
you
be
bet.
that we'd have to refer them out to somebody if they're looking at emergency stays or some sort of other litigation.
Okay, D says, currently working permanent full-time employee Ontario. Postgrad work permit expiring September 2025. Yeah, that is, you fit squarely within the 1 million people that Minister Miller right here wants to leave by the end of the year and into next year. What are ways to get closed work permit? Knock 33102 RPN. I, is that a nurse? I don't know what an RPN is. 33102. Anyways, so with that knock, we know that that's a tier 3, so it's skilled. Okay.
Nurses' aides,
Um, what is it?
nurses' aides, and
Yeah,
orderlies.
okay. Nursing. Okay. So basically, in your situation, a tier 3 is a skilled position. So obviously, the work that you're accumulating, that's positive towards express entry, but it all comes down to wage. And so when your wage is in the low wage category, if you are in an area where there is 6% or greater unemployment, or your current employer has more than 10% of their workforce on LMIA based work permits, then they are barred from even applying. And if those barriers are not there, then it comes down to Ontario's a tough spot. There's a lot of unemployment in Ontario. But if you're in an area, there are a few communities where the unemployment rates are below 6%. Well, your employer still has to show that there's no Canadian or permanent resident to do the job before they can obtain approval on their labor market impact assessment. And Alicia, I think right now, what are we sitting at? 7 or 8 months of processing. Like I just visited with one of our clients who does the door to door sales kind of stuff. Just yesterday, I was talking with him, and he was wondering, where things are at. And the reality is, our construction company, are we into 8 months now? Like it's crazy.
Nine
Yeah,
months. Nine
9.
months, and we followed up with them so many times. The posted processing times for LMIAs are like 67
It,
business days. They lie.
yeah, yep,
When they followed up with ESDC, they said they are still working on applications submitted in March of 2024.
yeah. So, and people say, well, why is that the case? Well, there's probably a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is there was some um, messaging from various parties that potentially ESDC was not doing a good enough job vetting applications on the front end, which could very well be true, and that they were being pushed, the officers, to approve quickly to keep processing times down. And then when that came to light, and it's always, it's public shaming in the media that tends to drive immigration policy. That's when we saw things kind of grind to a halt, because I think they basically said, okay, we can't do this anymore. We have to verify and vet every single applicant. And when you have high volumes and not enough officers to do it, the only thing that gives is processing times. If it takes an officer now, they have to call and speak with every person, which they had stopped doing, Alicia. They had done it for program integrity purposes back when Kenny, I think, was in power. They always had that as a requirement. It seemed like even before, when the Liberals were in power in the early 2000s, that officer contact was always really important to verify and make sure the information was correct and to ensure that it wasn't some fraudulent application. Well, I think now they're really ratcheting down and they're making sure on the front end that these LMIAs are legitimate and genuine, and that there really is a need for the foreign worker, and the consequences processing times.
Yeah, and maybe Mark, like maybe you can pull up the
Mhm.
unemployment numbers and
Yep.
the refusal to process because so anybody who's in this situation where your work permit is expiring, your PGWP is expiring, and you are looking for an employer who has to get an LMIA. So D, your employer you have to find an employer who's going to have an LMIA to support your work. I can put it in the um,
Yeah, I'm just
chat
trying to pull
work.
it up. Oh, do you have it there? Okay. I was just
Yeah, just I
pulling
have
up through my
to
email.
I have to try to get it into this one
Oh, I
because I'm
see. Okay.
using two computers, and here we go. I'll send it to you in that one.
I
Um,
think I actually found it here too.
yeah.
Okay.
So D, the first thing is to make sure that you are looking at working in an economic region where the unemployment rates are lower than 6%. So this is where if you scroll all the way down, I mean, there are some exceptions, but if you scroll all the way down to the unemployment rates by census metropolitan areas, so here's the good news. If you're outside of a CMA, then these don't apply. So this is where
Yeah.
we keep harping on rural, right? This
Yeah.
is where we're looking at what are the major economic regions outside of CMAs. And that's where you want to focus your recruitment and your job search. So take a look at these. Anything that's highlighted in bold is a no go. Those are under a refusal to process on LMIAs. So you want to look somewhere that is not in bold. Any of these regions, these CMAs would be okay, or or something that's not on the list as a CMA. So take a look. What I say for people who have valid express entry profiles is go to the job match. So go to Job Bank, go to job match, create a plus account if you have a valid express entry profile, and start looking for your knock and finding employers who are advertising on the job bank because maybe they're already in the process of trying to apply for an LMIA. And if they can't find Canadians, they might then consider you, especially if you're in a high in demand job like a registered practical nurse or a nurse's aide or an orderly. That is something where you might have a better chance at finding a job and an employer who would go through that LMIA process.
Yes. And just to show here, like if you look at Ontario, like Ontario is a tough spot to be in. There's a few communities. You can see Kingston, Peterborough, um, Brantford, and then Sudbury. You can see Thunder Bay, which we said was announced as one of the selected communities for the rural community immigration pilot. Um, is 4.9. But then as we slide down here, a lot of the one big surprise I had, so we can see Calgary and Edmonton are obviously have higher unemployment rates. We're fine here, at least I'm fine down in Lethbridge here, but I was very surprised to see that Vancouver generally was 5.9. I didn't realize that even Victoria, I guess it's just so hard to find a place to live in Victoria that, that it's the unemployment rates are so low.
Mhm.
Um, but Abbotsford, Kelowna, Vancouver, these are all under. So,
Mhm.
yeah. And you can see it changes and evolves, right? It's 6.2, 6.5, 5.9. And the one thing I'll point out here is that there's a reason that they post these ranges because theoretically, Alicia, if you submitted your application during this time period, um, then this should be the rule enforced on your application. Which, when processing times are 9 or 10 months, it almost defeats the like it makes it so difficult. I could see an officer saying, "Well, no, we change our policy now," because they do it for
Yeah.
wages, right? So, what would prevent them if a wage goes up? Then you have to pay the prevailing wage rate. But my opinion is this effectively kills the entire application, which I think they're not quite prepared to do. Maybe, but we'll see. We will see.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We've got a few more here. Okay, Moy says, does casual work qualify as part time for express entry if the hours aren't guaranteed? But I consistently work 20 hours per week. I have worked for 1.3 years so far. So maybe I can answer this one. So they don't care what you're labeled. So some people might be labeled full time. Well, you're never really going to be labeled full time and work 29 hours a week. But it's really how many hours you actually worked. So if you consistently work 20 hours per week, then you can safely consider yourself part-time. The key here is that you're going to need to work a full 2 years to accumulate the 1 year of equivalent full-time work experience. And I have so many consultations with people on this issue who feel that because they're working 40 hours a week that they've reached the 1560 hours sooner, so it shouldn't be an issue and they should be able to submit their express entry application. And in fairness, Alicia, in many instances, individuals will just say, well, yeah, I have 1560. So when they're answering the little wizard that they have to answer in order to determine if they're eligible for the pool, it rounds up by months. So it's possible to have 10 months and I guess 2 days of work experience equate to um, 12 months. And what I mean by that is if you work October 31st and you work all the way through to September the 1st of the next year, even though that's like 2 days less, 2 months from a year, it will round up and give you the full year. So, but yeah, I don't know if you have
But you have
anything
to
to
be
add to
careful
that.
about that because you
Mhm.
could get refused for not meeting eligibility.
Oh,
So,
yes,
and you
yes.
could get
Yeah.
refused for misrep. Yep.
Thank you. Yes. So just to clarify, okay, it rounds it up, but it doesn't mean that you, when you submit your EAPR, that you can do so without having met the 1 year. It'll get refused. The council, which I wish they would, I've not found any program delivery instructions or anything on this issue that specifically states if you have been invited before you hit your anniversary on whatever, in most cases for people, it's going to be their second year. Um, then you're instructed to wait and not submit your EAPR until you've actually accumulated the full 2 years. I say two because you have to pretty much misrepresent when you're completing your initial, the completing the eligibility tool. You'd have to say, yes, I already have a year when you really don't yet have a year. So
Yeah. And
don't do
I've
that.
literally had people who didn't understand that, and then
Mhm.
they hired me to go back and to fix their express entry profile, to
Yeah.
take down their profile, to make sure that they aren't misrepresenting because they had made a mistake and they had said that yes, they had a year when they didn't. And especially now that the misrepresentation penalties are getting huge. It is so important that, and we've been seeing more and more people coming to us on consults with a
Mm.
finding of misrep on very, very, very small things. And IRCC is digging in their heels. They are going to find
Yeah.
misrep at the drop of a hat right now. So,
Yeah.
make sure that if you have not properly accumulated 52 weeks, so 52 weeks of full time work, so at least 30 hours per week in every week. Sometimes it gets tricky if people take extended vacations and they're outside of Canada. If you're not physically inside of Canada, you might have to deduct that month from your 52 weeks. So there's a lot of nuance in this where you could go wrong. So be careful with that.
Mhm. Brian asks another great express entry question. He said, "Thank you, Mark and Alicia. If one applies for PR and submits a PCC from a country and then goes to that country for a week, should one update the police clearance certificate?" So this is stuff that we talk about specifically in the Express Entry Accelerator course. So this is built right in, excuse me, right into the course. And if you scroll down to the end, you can see that there's a section, module 6. All the modules are broken down here, but module 6 specifically addresses each document in detail. There's a video, there's sample documents. This issue that Brian has discussed right here, brought up, is exactly one that we see a lot. Now, here's the issue. So for years, I spoke on panels about express entry with the head IRCC officers. In many of those national conferences with the Canadian Bar Association, it was reiterated that 1 week going back is really not that big of a deal. Okay, that's what the head officer said. But listen carefully, listen very carefully. Under no circumstance do you ever submit a police clearance certificate if you have returned back to that country and that PCC is more than 6 months old. If it's still 6 months validity and you've gone back at the time in which you submit your EAPR, then you may be okay. But I do not cut that short close at all. If I have even a hint that the police clearance certificate is expiring or will be expiring, in other words, hitting the 6 month period, and you're in that country, you've been in that country, then I get a new one. If, however, Brian, you never go back to that country, well, then the reality is that police clearance certificate will continue to remain valid even beyond the 6 month period. But I still look at it carefully. And if I think, it's been a little while, I'll still encourage you to get an updated PCC, even if you haven't gone back. So a very, very conservative approach is how I do this, Alicia.
It's just not worth getting your like,
No.
it is so hard to get an ITA, and if you manage to get an ITA, you definitely don't wanna get it refused
Mm.
because your police certificate is out of date and you need a new one.
Yeah. Okay, last super chat here. Then we're going to dive into a few more questions. So, Hosh says, how can I prove my intent to leave Quebec upon receiving PR? I'm looking for a job outside, but the market is tough. Would a record of job applications suffice or a uni acceptance letter? A university acceptance letter.
So, Hosh, again, you are not eligible for express entry if you are can't prove that you have an intention to live outside of Quebec. So the onus is on you. You have an obligation to prove that you will live outside of Quebec. And for most people, I say move right now, move outside of Quebec, start building a life outside of Quebec, get a lease, open a bank account, get your driver's license, start finding a job outside of Quebec because the risk is that IRCC says we don't think that, a record of job applications is enough. Like there's nothing that actually says you're going to move if all you've done is apply for jobs but you haven't physically changed your residence. And they can cancel your PR application. They can just say we are going to refuse it for not meeting the intention to live outside of Quebec. So this is something where I don't think you want to be too cute about it. I think you want to definitely move as soon as possible and prove and provide evidence that you have done so.
All right, let's jump to this is from Lasha. This is a a situation that we see quite frequently. So me and my wife were on a work permit in Nova Scotia. My 3-year-old son has a visitor record. However, his visa has expired. Can we apply for a visitor visa for him? Can we apply for a visitor visa for him from within Canada? So I think truly this is visitor visa, not visitor record. I think this is the case. Probably the passport was not issued for a long period of time because it was a little child. But this is, see, you can see here, me and my wife, can we apply is one of these, you guys. So I ring that bell because there's a number of factors here that we can't answer, Lasha, your comment. And so when you have this situation where you've got a question, either if we don't answer it here, it's something specific to you, all you need to do is go over, there's a link to book a consult, go over to our firm website, and you can click on speak to a lawyer, book a consult. And then from here, it's super easy to just choose the time slot that you're looking for. And Alicia and I and Igor, when you jump on that call, we're ready to talk to you. So we provide you with an intake form in advance. And so the advice that you get is going to be um, very, very applicable and will resolve your concerns within there. On occasion, we will get something that, maybe I don't have an answer for. And I'll actually, this is a good segue into something, Alicia, that relates to the whole concept of post-grad work permits. So we are now seeing those refusals for spousal open work permits when the post-grad work permit is submitted in advance. So, and a decision has not been made yet. So, IRCC, I've got huge issues, and I'm going to pull up Minister Miller here because I think you guys are being jerks. And I think Minister Miller, I think this is sharp practice if you were a lawyer. But what we're seeing with some of the immigration officers, I have an example where an individual's spousal open work permit was refused just maybe 2 weeks ago, but it was refused on the same day that the post-grad work permit was. The post-grad was submitted 2 months before the spousal open work permit. They had waited to get the job offer and for the spouse to work before they submitted the spousal open work permit. And then the officer quickly pulled up the spousal open work permit, refused it, and then approved the post-grad work permit the same day, 4 hours later or 3 hours later. And personally, I think that is awful. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's just wrong. And at this stage, so what do the clients have to do? Well, now she's got the work permit, she meets the requirements, and so they apply for restoration. And then the spouse has to stop working, and they have to wait. The good Lord knows how long, 5, 6 months for the work permit to be processed. And Minister Miller, I think that is very, very, it's really low class. It really is. And I think that's something that your officers need to be chastised for, because I think, sure, you want people out, great. You want to get reelected, great. But the reality is, these are real lives that you're affecting. And that type of a thing doesn't do anyone a service. It really doesn't. So I was a little upset about that situation.
Yeah, and Lasha, the reason that we are saying book a consult is because the status of your kids, if they fall out of status, can make you inadmissible as the parents. And so this is something that you do really, really need to double check, because sometimes, and I always tell people when they're applying for their work permits and the kids are coming with them, if the kids are school age, make sure they are actually applying for a study permit, because what often happens is that their visitor status will only be granted for 6 months or maybe a year. And if the parents forget and the child falls out of status and they are now technically an overstay and you're past your 90-day restoration period, it can mean that the entire family is now inadmissible and has to leave. So there's a big risk on this, and that's why we say book a consult. We need to know more about what's their country of nationality, what's your country of nationality and citizenship, what are the passport expiry dates, when was the visitor record last valid, how long is it expired, and is it a visa or is it a visitor status that you're looking at? So.
Okay, I'm going to pull up a follow up of Brian here. He's clarifying. He said, Mark and Alicia, thank you again, Mark and Alicia. But just to clarify, one will upload the PCC and after applying has to go for a week. Then it should be updated. No, Brian, if your police clearance certificate was valid at the time in which you submit your EAPR, no, you do not need to get a new PCC if you are required to go back to your home country after your application is submitted. So they can always ask you to go and get a new one if they want to, but it's not going to cause your application to be rejected as incomplete or somehow get rejected, as long as when you filed your EAPR, everything is locked in and the PCC is valid at that time. Okay. All right. A couple other questions. John Z, and this is one that just always boggles my mind, Alicia, but I'm grateful that it's asked. So, do you guys accept CEC applications? How can we contact to get service and its charge? So, 100%, we're here to help and answer questions, but we absolutely assist people with all of their immigration applications. We do. We do it in a different way, and we encourage you to take a look at our website where you can see about us, and you can learn all about how we work with our clients. And we think it's awesome. We love how we work with our clients. It always starts with an immigration consultation. So if you're saying, well, how do you work with us? It always starts with booking that consult. And then from there, if it's a good fit, if we feel like we're in a position we're able to assist you, and that what you're asking us to help with is something that we can do, which is, there's few things that we can't, but if someone comes to me and says, can you help me file a refugee claim, I will refer that to someone else because we don't do that type of work. But you can see here, excuse me, when it comes to our approach here, we have a detailed breakdown of how we work with you. There's no one in between. Us as lawyers work directly with you guys. And we essentially teach you everything that we know. We work with you to review your application. We show you how to fill in the forms. It's a complete one-on-one process. And so I encourage you to go take a look at it. And then if you're wondering, well, what are our fees? Well, we have them all listed right here. Generally speaking, there's some that are not, but for the most part, our fees are all broken down and listed here on our website. And so, but like I said, everything starts with a consultation, and we would love to work with you guys. This is what we do. This is the thing we love, doing more than anything else, especially express entry. So, all right. Okay. Okay. Dijin says, my study permit for my current bachelor's program at the University of Lethbridge will expire in September 2026. So the current study permit. I will pursue a master's degree starting September 2025. 16 months. Do I need to apply for a new study permit? Thanks. This is one of the most confused. Well, I just finished saying that about the spousal open work permits. It seems like every decision that has been made by IRCC to change or to modify processes creates tremendous confusion. And so one of the things we see a lot is people who were used to being able to change institutions. So this is what I'd see in Lethbridge. Someone would apply for the University of Lethbridge because it appeared more prestigious. They would show their funds, whether or not maybe they had them or not. I'll leave that aside, not my clients, but this is what people would do. They would pool their money together, get their show money together, and then they would apply for a study permit for the U of L. The moment they'd get to Lethbridge, they would then immediately try to switch their program to the college to a 2-year program instead of 4 so they can get the 3-year work permit. Happened in every city across the country. And that is why now, in order to actually switch schools, you need to apply for a brand new study permit. So the question is, if you are continuing in the same school and you are proceeding forward with a new program, do you need to apply for a new study permit? Well, one response right from the get-go, I'll say, Dijin, is how long is the master's program? So I have to assume that in any event, you're still going to need to apply for a new study permit. But Alicia, were you able to find anything in that regard?
Yeah, so if you go to changing your school or program, they have the new rule starting November 8th, 2024, where yes, you have to be enrolled in the new DLI named, well, you have to be enrolled in the same DLA named on your study permit. So you can no longer change DLIs if you're changing your schools. But then it goes through, yeah, exactly. And then there's a whole bunch of drop downs about moving changing DLIs at post-secondary, if you're moving from post-secondary to secondary, if you're changing DLIs within the same one. So scroll down through here and try to find the answer because everything changed as of November. So
And I don't, and this is one thing that Dijin, we have not, like, I have to assume that you're going to apply for a new study permit. Okay. That's my default. Okay. If you are looking that far in advance and your current study permit expires in September, but you're looking to go September 2025 for 16 months, you're going to need to extend it. When I look at if your start date is September 2025 and your program goes, you're not going to, I'm assuming it's 16 months. So yeah, like you're going to need to, I don't know, Alicia, how she would not, study Dijin, or how he would not need to apply for a new study permit. I know
well,
the
and
question. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and just because the study permit has to be valid for the entire period of your program, right? And so yeah. So
Yeah.
and then be careful about if you're trying to do work while you are also studying as well, because that's also tied to the conditions on the study permit.
Yeah. And just for greater clarity here, Dijin, our recommendation and opinion is that you should absolutely apply for a new study permit for the new program. So that's my response. Can you potentially keep keep studying under the force of your previous study permit? Well, I don't have an answer for that. But you're eventually going to need to apply for the new study permit anyways. And from what they indicate about switching within schools, I have to assume that you shouldn't make assumptions, but just trust me on this. I would apply for a new study permit. I wouldn't take a chance. All
But we
right,
need more
let's.
information to give you an actual legal advice.
Mhm. Yes. Okay, let's hit just a couple more here. You were into OT, and once again, I apologize for not being able to get through. Yeah, everything. Anish says, joining my first master class today, I used the reference builder and my job duties for work came back as a 90% match to knock. Anything to keep in mind or cautionary tips while using the AI? Anish, just make sure once you've identified. So what Anish is talking about is the custom GPT that we've built for the reference letter, building your reference letter and selecting your knock, it's super, super helpful. You always need to verify it yourself. So when it finds the knock, you are going to manually go through and just double check and make sure that what it has assessed, and even the duties that it lists for the knock, that it is actually that knock code. So sometimes it hallucinates. We define it as that, I guess, within the AI world. Sometimes it can hallucinate. And so you just need to make sure that you go back to the government website, the knock 2021, just double check and make sure that the knock code they've pulled up actually matches the duties that the AI has selected. And we have really worked with it to try to eliminate those mistakes. But always verify it. But boy, does it save time. Oh, it is so efficient. So efficient. Okay. Let's see here. Uh, okay, here's one, which obviously we're filing more H&Cs these days. He says, hey, Mark and Alicia, is there normally an AOR for H&C applications? Thanks.
Yeah, and so eventually there will be, but it might take a very long time. So that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll pull up this one for Alberta. Nima says, can a spousal open work permit holder eligible for Alberta Express Entry? Thanks. Okay, so Express Entry isn't subject to the same restrictions as the Alberta Opportunity Stream. So technically, yes, is the answer. But what constitutes the Express Entry stream is significantly compartmentalized now. So there's so many people in Alberta looking for spots. It is going to be a rare situation where Alberta is going to nominate someone who isn't already working in the province. If you're in the province working on a spousal open work permit, and let's say it's accelerated tech and you submit an expression of interest, it's possible, or the rural renewal stream, it's possible. What you won't be eligible for on a spousal open work permit is through the Alberta Opportunity Stream, which is kind of the main flagship kind of program within the province. Okay, I think
And
maybe
Mark,
we'll wrap it up there. Is there any
okay,
other,
there was
Alicia, that
just
you want to hit?
one last one, and I can't remember who it was, but they had asked, do you have to have a job when you apply for your postgrad work permit? And I wanted to clarify because this is super confusing because of all the spousal provisions that are muddling the waters. But no, you don't have to have, as the principal applicant, you don't already have to have a job when you
Mhm.
apply for a postgrad work permit. But it is really important that if your spouse was trying to get a spousal open work permit and they qualified, and that's going to be a big if because of all the rule changes. But in order to have a spouse qualify, the principal applicant had to have a job and prove that they were in a high skilled occupation and prove that they would be working for 6 months under the old rules. And then, of course, they changed the rules now. And so now it's saying that you're not eligible if the principal applicant doesn't already have a PGWP that's valid for 6 months, 16 months. But the general rule, if you are not married, you're not worried about open spousal work permits, and you just need to apply for your postgrad work permit, make sure that you do so within 90 days of completion of your studies. Otherwise, you're not going to be eligible for that PGWP. So there's nothing for the principal applicant that requires you to actually have a job before you apply for your PGWP. So make sure that you're meeting the program eligibility requirements, your study permit is still valid at the time that you're submitting that application, and you properly have your proof of completion. And I saw another couple questions about, well, what if I applied too early for the PGWP and I didn't have full proof of completion? They can
That's a problem.
refuse
Mhm.
if they don't believe that you have all the proper proof of completion of your studies, and that's normally a letter from your university or an email, as well as your transcripts and your degree or diploma. So just be careful about that, but make sure that you're also looking at your time frame because there's a time deadline within which you've got to apply for that PGWP.
Mhm. Simeon says, do you guys give consultancy on knock code? I have previous experience as a customer success manager and in business development, both of which there isn't a knock that matches the description. Absolutely. We do that. We do a lot of that. And I would also encourage, Simeon, that you consider subscribing to the Express Entry Accelerator course that I talked about, because in there we have that custom GPT that also, and I use that when I'm working with clients because it's just faster to pull up than search through the website. But every single time I go in and I vet it and I make sure that what the AI pulled up quickly is actually accurate. We go through every duty, we match it up, we make sure that it is 100% consistent and that you've demonstrated you're performing a substantial number of the main duties. But yes, Simeon, sometimes it's your position that you're filling kind of crosses over between one versus another. And the larger the company that you are working for, the more specialized roles tend to be. So maybe you're only doing 2 or 3 of those duties because there's another person with the volume that you're generating that's dealing with another area and you're really hyper specialized. So that's kind of the opposite. And with small companies, small businesses, sometimes you could be working in more than one occupation, but there's always one that is the primary. And that's what we can figure out in the context of our consultation. Field Marshal says my favorite people. I'll give you one of these. Okay. All right. Well, we went a little bit longer because we had so much to talk about with changes to immigration. And we are so appreciative of your questions because that's what infuses life into our lives. We're definitely going to have a bunch of other things that we're going to be releasing, more videos. Common sense is love you guys, always giving great advice, but still being realistic that some people might have no options but to go home. And that's the reality. Like you can't bury your head in your sand, right? And Nima says, thanks so much for answering the questions. You're very welcome. And then Sarab, I know we're just at the end. I'm just zipping through here. Startup visas are a mess. So spotlight on startup visa process. The reality is there's only 10 that each of these designated organizations, at least um, the designated partner companies that are helping to facilitate this, they're restricted to 10 per year because of massive oversubscription. Now, there's obviously issues of fraud and whether or not these startups are actually going to start up in Canada. And so they've made decisions to significantly reduce. And when there's no options through express entry, people choose whatever else is available. And when people are desperate and money is to be made, then corruption kind of seeps its way in. And yeah, so those are my views on the startup visa. Okay. All right, guys, thank you so much. We got through a bunch of questions, and thank you so much for everyone, your participation, for being willing to kind of be patient and understanding. We had a lot to go through at the beginning. We were a few minutes late getting started, but this is what Alicia and I love to do, and Igor as well. And we would encourage you once again. You can see this is sponsored by the 2024 Express Entry Accelerator. If you have not yet had a chance to slide over and take a look at what's here, you can click the link in the description. This is an ongoing process. So the course, it's got over 10 hours of on-demand lessons, and the masterclass that is going to happen tonight at 4 is available to get any further questions that you want. And the beautiful part of the masterclass is it is drilled down explicitly on express entry. So, and another thing that people really love about the masterclass is they learn from other people's questions. So when one person asks, often someone says, man, I didn't even think to ask that question. So the benefits just kind of flow over and over. And I love it. I absolutely love this. And when you subscribe, you have lifetime access to this and to come back to as many master classes that you want on a biweekly basis. So definitely check that out. Also, I'll just reiterate again on our firm website, if you have any questions that weren't answered or you have a specific legal issue that you need help with, it always starts with a consultation. And yes, we have all of our list of services as well as really detailed information on a number of things, including if your applications are refused or delayed. Judicial reviews, reconsiderations, mandamus. We assist people with humanitarian compassion applications. We don't do asylum. Visit, study, work, sponsor your spouse, express entry. You can see all of this is here, and then our fees are all broken down here as well. Then other free resources, the blogs, check those out. Alicia's going to be dropping a fantastic blog on bridging open work permits and bridging closed work permits, and why you guys better know the difference, because it can mean the difference between getting your work permit approved or rejected. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, do it. And of course, our YouTube channel, which is where we are doing this live today. And it's also being spun out through, as we saw today, LinkedIn, X, and Facebook as well. And then finally, there is our how to apply for a tourist visa to Canada, the TRV course, which Igor created, which is excellent. So those are the two flagship kind of courses we have right now. The spousal, I've been meaning to get this darn thing out. I keep saying every week, I swear it's going to get released. This is the week. Okay. Thanks so much, Alicia, for joining. Another great live Q&A.